Hello everyone, welcome to the lecture number 16, which is the first lecture of week 4, and the title of today's lecture is Introducing Morphology. So, I am sure that you remembered the term morphology, because when we started talking about the levels of linguistic analysis in the very beginning part of the course, we did mention the term morphology, and we will be coming back to that. So, we will be talking about the idea of word and non-word, what is a word and what is a non-word for today's class. Then we will be talking about the idea of mental lexicon, which is a slightly new concept, but I hope you will like this. We will be talking about the idea of lexeme and word forms and the difference between these two. We will also see if we can break some words in order to start doing some analysis with words and word forms. So, morphology is basically doing things with words and word forms, right. And then we will be defining morpheme, which is a major unit of morphology. So, these are the targets for the first lecture for morphology. So, we already talked about these ideas previously while talking about the levels of linguistics. If you remember, we did say that in the domain of morphology, we tried to analyze the structure of words and parts of words. We can also account for the formation of words. We say that we can create a new word by adding something to the beginning, end or middle of another word, for example. So, we will be discussing it in more detail. We also mentioned that when we make words, we try to show some grammatical concepts like number, case, agreement and tense. We will be discussing these in detail as well. And there are various processes for creating words. We will also learn about those processes as a part of the section called morphology. So, I have put this phrase words in the mind in quote, because I am not creating it. It is taken from a book called Words in the Mind. I will be sharing the reference with you at the end. So, the book is basically talking about some very interesting questions that can help you to start thinking about morphology or the study of word and word forms. So, remember I told you that we have to unlearn certain ideas in order to do linguistics, because the traditional ways of doing things with certain structural aspects of language are very different from the ways in which we do analyze language. So, that is why there are some unlearning components present in different layers of linguistic analysis, and today we will be talking about some very basic questions in the beginning. So, we know about the faculty of language that we discussed in the first 2 weeks, specifically during week 2, and we know that there is something called the mental grammar. But now, if you ask this question, how do people store the words in the mind? So, we do have access to many words, we can use them for various purposes, but where do we store them and how do we store them? You can ask this question, this is a very obvious question. And along with that, we can also ask, how do people select the words that they want to use? So, we are basically selecting particular words and creating sentences with the help of those words. So, how is the selection process and how do we basically select for use it for a sentence? You can also have a question like, do children use the words like adults? So, you have learned certain ideas related to child language. And I am sure you have started thinking about child language from multiple perspectives for yourself. So, you can obviously ask this question, whether children use words like adults or there is some kind of developmental stages and strategies. Also, do we stack the words randomly in our faculty of language? So, again it is related to the organization question, how do we organize words inside our head. So, I am sure some of you already had these questions and I am just trying to list the questions together taking help of the work Words in the Mind. Now, I am asking you to remember that we do access many words and access it very fast. So, we are basically we do not know the numbers, we will be learning about them gradually, but we do access many words and very quickly we can do it. We know that our knowledge of language is unconscious, but it is also very quick. You can have some more questions related to words and word forms. For example, can the same word serve different purposes? You can interpret the question in different ways, it is up to you. Are the words related to psychological components like memory? When we are talking about stacking the words, organizing them as a part of our mental grammar, we can of course relate them to some psychological components like memory. Do we memorize words in a particular way, in other words? And how many words do the adults know? We were asking whether it is different from child language, now we are asking the probable number, we do not know. So, here are some important points which will be super useful for you while we begin the journey in the domain of morphology. So, you can say that an educated adult may know around 1,50,000 words, and if you remember the cases of Washoe and Neem, the chimpanzees, who were basically a part of the experiments of American psychologists for understanding animal communication. So, Washoe and Neem used around 200 words of science. So, it rings a bell, right, there is a difference in numbers. Now, we know that language is unique to humans and when we will be exploring different layers of linguistic analysis, we will basically trying to strengthen our analysis and understanding of the capacity of human language. So, in the domain of morphology, initially you can see that there is a huge difference in numbers, right. You can also have the next question, are some words considered as basic words? Do we consider some words as basic words? We do not know, we also have to learn about them. And are there different parts of speech for the same word? So, I am borrowing the idea of parts of speech from school grammar, and for people coming from computer science background, you are also familiar with this idea of tagging, parts of speech tagging. So, I am borrowing it from different domains and asking this question, very basic question, whether there are different parts of speech for the same word, whether you can assign different parts of speech for the same word. And when we were talking about stacking the words in the mental grammar, similarly you can also ask regarding the dictionary. So, you can say that the storehouse of words inside our head and storehouse of the words in an online platform or a thick book are somehow similar. So, when you are thinking about the similarity or differences, at this point I am asking the question to you, how do we organize words in a dictionary? Here I am introducing the idea of mental lexicon, which is a very, very important concept, not only in terms of morphology, but the overall linguistic theory, because we have to come back to mental lexicon in future for some other purpose as well. We have the mental dictionary or mental lexicon. So, mental lexicon is basically the storehouse where we store words together, and how do we store them, we do not know yet. So, we have a storage capacity and also an efficient system for retrieval. So, when we were saying that we use them, we select them and then we use them for a particular sentence or context, we are basically thinking about the storage. So, we bring something from the storage and then also use it, and the system of retrieval is also very efficient. We can very quickly take out something from the mental dictionary and use it. We know that children access the rules, children have the rules of language as a part of their mental grammar. Here you can say that children create words with the help of the rules. Now, I will ask you to remember the examples that we discussed while talking about rules of language or the mental grammar as a whole. The irregular verb forms, remember we said that children add ed with any verb that they come across, like goed instead of saying went. So, this is something where they are forming a word in a different way. So, you can say that they have not mastered the rule of creation of an irregular verb form, which is a word form of course. So, what is the idea behind it? What is the story behind it? Is it the case that there is some sort of developmental stage or some sort of stage where children learn the rules associated with word formation? So, we will be also talking about them. But at this point, let me mention that there is something called the vocabulary spurt, which is a well discussed idea in the domain of developmental psycholinguistics. Some of you must be knowing about it, specifically those who are coming from education background. While talking about the development of language, we do talk about vocabulary spurt. It happens at around 18 months, where there is a hike of the use of words. So, it said that children learn at least 1 or 2 new words every day, and the total number of words is very high. We will be talking about it in future, but at this point let me mention the idea of vocabulary spurt, because it is related to the development of morphology. Now, I will ask you to start thinking about something which is a non-word, which is very similar with the examples of ungrammatic sentences that you yourself created for the exercise that I had given you previously. And I am sure you actually sat down and considered those examples in order to judge the ungrammaticality. So, we are doing a similar task here. I am asking you to think about some non-words in English and your language. Create the list and keep it for yourself. I have basically given 2 examples here. The Sloddy cat sat on the mat, and I have also highlighted the non-words, and the boy pockled the cat. So, we do not know what are the meanings of Sloddy and pockled, but if I ask you about the grammatical category of the words, I am sure you can tell me that Sloddy is an adjective and pockled is a verb. Why are you saying that Sloddy is an adjective? I am assuming you are saying because it is sitting before the cat, the noun, right, it is modifying the cat. And also pockled, because of the existence of the past tense ed, you are assuming that it is some kind of a verb, and also it is like an action word. So, how do you define these highlighted words? You can comment on the grammatical category, like I tried to say on behalf of you, but what about the meaning? Can you assume that these non-words have some meaning? You can think about some meaning. How do you do that? So, I am asking you to reflect on the strategies that are helping you to figure out the meaning. So, there can be different realizations of a same word. For example, see, seeing, saw, seen are the different realizations of the same vocabulary item, which is known as lexeme. So, lexeme is an abstract idea, and we can say that see, seeing, saw, seen are all parts of a same lexeme. So, this is a very important notion in morphology, and you should be highlighting this as a part of your learning, that lexeme is an important concept. And they have a core meaning, right. If you think about these examples, see, seeing, saw, seen, you can say that they have a core meaning. All these are basically related to the verb to see. So, there is something related to seeing. So, they have a core meaning and they are spelled differently and pronounced differently, but there is some kind of a commonness which is abstract and which is associated with the meaning. So, you have to remember this, and a particular realization of a lexeme is a particular word form. So, while discussing the difference between lexeme and word form, we can say that see, seeing, saw, seen are different word forms of a same lexeme. I will also introduce you to the notion of the grammatical word. Grammatical word is also a technical term in morphology. So, if you think about the word cut, C-U-T, you can say that it belongs to a verbal lexeme. Verbal means related to verb, cut. So, it is a verb to cut. It can have different word forms which are part of a same lexeme. So, now I am asking you, can it belong to a different grammatical word? So, this is very simple, right. You can say yes, it can also belong to a nominal lexeme or a lexeme related to noun, because you can also refer to it as a cut, a wound. So, this is important for us to understand, because in morphology we will continuously come back to this idea of grammatical category. Grammatical category is a very important part of morphology. So, you will be learning about different types of morphological analysis, we will be learning about different processes of morphology, but all the time we have to keep in mind that we are talking about the idea of grammatical category. So, same word form may belong to separate lexeme. One is a verbal lexeme, another is a nominal lexeme, you have to remember. And the word form belongs to different word classes. So, this is something which we have to keep in mind, because based on the context it may change. So, you have to understand the meaning of the entire sentence and then comment on the status of the lexeme or the word form. This is very important. And there are different physical realizations of a word form. So, different physical realization of a word form is important for our purpose, and we will be coming back to this idea. Now, I have a small exercise for you, which is pretty simple again. You have to break some words. So, you can do it for yourself, and you can tell yourself what is happening. For some words like unbreakable, unable, disallow and dislike, it is pretty simple, right. You can simply say dis and like, and if you remember your some notions of your school grammar, you can say that, oh, there is a prefix dis or there is a prefix called un, and unbreakable, you can say there is a prefix and a suffix, right, un and then able. But what is happening to the first two examples? I am saying the specifically for the very first example. So, if we borrow a word from a different language like Greek or Latin in English, or if you think about your own language, if you borrow a word from a different language, you may not find a way to break them in the way you break other words of your language or the same language. So, there is some problem, right, I mean how to break them, but you can actually take more words and complicated words by yourself and try breaking them, because this is an interesting and useful exercise for our purpose. So, bibliography and bibliophile you can break, but Bible there is a question mark, and helicopter it is difficult because it is not English, it is taken from some other language. So, that is why breaking a word is not always a very easy task. So, there are problems in analyzing some words. When we analyze words, we basically use the principle of contrast. What do we mean by principle of contrast? So, when you did phonology, you already learnt about the idea of contrast for some other purpose. So, you can think about that and bring your ideas here as well. So, you can think about the phonological shape, you can also think about meaning. This is very important because in morphological analysis we have to think about both. So, in linguistics we often deal with data from different languages and they have different processes involved in terms of morphology, but we always think about these two whatever the data is. We think about the phonological shape and the meaning. Meaning will be helping you to conduct the morphological analysis and phonological shape will direct you to do the analysis. Both are important to analyze word forms. So, the last thing that we will be doing for today's class, the introductory class for morphology, is to define a morpheme, and this is a very new concept which is different from lexeme, but morpheme is the central unit for the domain of morphology and we are beginning this section from today. So, from the next lectures we will be dealing with the idea of morpheme always for several purposes. So, how do we define morpheme? A morpheme is the smallest difference in the shape of a word that correlates with the smallest difference in word or sentence meaning or in grammatical structure. This can be slightly confusing for you, but if you break the definition in several components, it will be easier. So, smallest difference in the shape of a word. So, it is some kind of small unit and there is some kind of relation with meaning that we will be dealing with in the next class and defining it a very different way again. So, we are also talking about the correlation with smallest difference in word or sentence meaning. So, we are highlighting the meaning part, but we are also highlighting the grammatical structure part. So, we have to remember that the shape of a word, smallest difference in a word, meaning and grammatical structure, all these are important parts of the definition of a morpheme that we have to keep in mind. So, coming to the conclusion, we will quickly do a recap of what we did today in the very first lecture of morphology. We learnt about the idea of mental lexicon, which is basically a storehouse of words inside our mind. We did talk about the fact that words can have different grammatical categories and you know what are the categories like noun, verbs, etc. We did mention that lexemes and word forms are different. A lexeme can have different word forms and same words belong to separate lexemes at times. Finally, we did discuss the definition of morpheme. So, these are the two key references. I hope we will learn more about morphology in the next class. Thank you.